right, so we are going to do some sour cream muffins using the creaming method again, just like we did for the chocolate chip cookies. So with all of the creaming method procedures, we're going to start off with our fat. In this case, it's just 100% butter. And we are just using white sugar. So I'm going to put those onto the mixer. We're using the paddle attachment for this again. Usually, always with the creaming method for anything, it's always going to be done with the paddle. If you tried to use the whisk or the whip attachment, the butter would just go inside and you wouldn't have very good results. You spend most of your time just digging it out. So, and it's hard on the butter being a little bit firmer, it's a little bit harder on those whisks. So I started on low speed just at the beginning so I didn't have that puff up a mess. Now I'm just gonna let this keep kind of mixing until they come together kind of in one almost like paste-like look. And also so it gets a little bit lighter and a little bit fluffier. I do have a little bit of butter sticking to one corner of this bowl, so I'm gonna stop this and just scrape that down real quickly just to make sure it's all mixing nice and even inside there. All right, so I'm gonna stand there and just let that cream. While that's creaming, I am gonna get together my dry ingredients just to move ahead for the next step down the road. So I'm just gonna sit together my dry ingredients, which is just flour. This one has baking soda and baking powder in it, has both. And then some salt. I'll just sip those together really quick, making sure I got everything through, no lumps. I'm gonna hold on for that for just a second. All right, so if you see in there, you can see that's nice and it's gotten a lot lighter in color. It's getting some air into it. I'm gonna scrape that down real quickly. And then I'm gonna let that mix and add my egg into it. So I have one egg here, just lightly beaten. Don't need to beat it a lot, just a little bit. Try to get all that egg out. So I only have one egg in this. I want to try to get as much of it in there as possible. And let that mix in a little bit, and then if need be, I will scrape it down before I move on to adding my last of my ingredients. Yeah, small amount. You know, we're only making a dozen muffins, and we have it in the 6-quart mixer, which is maybe just a little bit on the big side for this, but we just keep scraping it down, and it works out fine. And again, I don't really have to worry about over mixing at this point. I don't have any flour in there, so it's always, when you're combining flour and when you have flour in there, then you develop gluten, which can make my muffins very, very tough. So I'm just gonna mix these until it's a little more cohesive, which is about there right now. So, like some creamy method recipes that you see for cakes and stuff like that, we're gonna alternate our dry and our wet ingredients. So I'm gonna start off, I always do it 3 dry and 2 wet. So I always gotta start and end with dry. So I add my flour in and then allow that to mix in. And it's gonna look a little dry, and that's kind of to be expected. I'm gonna stir in roughly half. It doesn't have to be an exact measurement of my sour cream. That starts to get incorporated. I'm gonna add in a little bit more of my flour mixture now. ahead and put in the rest of my remaining sour cream. And then we will put in the last bit of flour. Now I'm gonna let that mix just briefly, do a good scrape. At this point, I don't really want to mix any more than I have to. Knock off the paddle. And then I'm gonna let this continue to mix. Now, while this is getting kind of its last mix here, I am gonna then add my vanilla extract. All right, so have that in there. A little bit of that vanilla is kind of stuck to the one edge. I'll just scrape that off and mix it in by hand. All right. I always make sure when I'm doing this final mix too that I'm scooping along the bottom. Sometimes on these bowls, that lip on the bottom will cause, especially fat, like butter, shortening. I think that will kind of hang out around that bottom part. And then when you go to scoop and you keep scooping, you end up having a piece that has a lot of butter in it. So, move on to my portion. I'm going to use a number 16 scoop, and I'm going to do this into a lined muffin tin. And whenever we scoop anything, we always want to make sure that it's very level and very even. We put it in. That way we get uniform muffins. Looks like I'm only going to get about 7 out of this batch, which is fine. All right, last step before I bake, I'm going to take our streusel from earlier, and I'm just going to sprinkle some of that on to each muffin. And these are going to go into the oven to bake. I'll just take out my extra papers, and we'll see these when they come out of the oven.